Hi, everyone. This is Karen with Solar Academy. I have Jon Bonanno again today with me, and today we're going to talk a little bit about grants as a type of financial fuel for your clean energy startup. So, Jon, please tell us a little bit about what we're going to share for the community this week.
Well, this is another chapter from the open office work that happened at New Energy Nexus. And what we were discovering is that certain CEOs can get into a place that they say, I must get venture funding or I'm not going to progress my business. And I think that that's just a false narrative that we need to dispel. The responsibility of the CEO is to capitalize the balance sheet appropriately for the timing and the amount so that you can achieve your milestones. That's your job. And that means that you should be sourcing grants, you should be sourcing awards from competitions, you should be creating revenue. There's plenty of activities that a CEO can take and prioritize above and beyond private equity investors making a choice to invest in your future. So this particular one, the CEO of a company called OpenGrants.io is Sedell Trebowski, who was at CarbonBLU prior, and he is now doing this platform where the CEO is able to put in the things that he's looking for, and it is a smart platform that triages all the available state level, federal level, quasi-municipal level foundations, grants that are available, and then down selects it according to keywords that the CEO puts in or the CEO's staff puts in, so that very quickly and efficiently the CEO can discover what grants are available right now for their company and the things they're doing.
Great. Thank you very much for this introduction.
Thank you.
Jon, can you also please tell us a little bit about what you do day to day?
Day to day, I am the managing partner of a company called Strategic Operating Partners, and we advise clean economy CEOs in all different types of things.
Great. Thank you so much.
Good. Welcome back to the next open office session. I am really excited about today's guest. Today's guest is a man that has been involved with non-dilutive capital, accessing non-dilutive capital for years, and does currently work with some of the best people in this business. Sedell Trebowski is the CEO of OpenGrants.io, and I want to say hello and welcome you and thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give you a little insight. Recently, we took our open office program is working with over 70 CEOs in one-on-one consultation and mentorship work. These are global, diverse CEOs trying to solve climate solutions somewhere in the world. And we recently took a poll where we said, hey, what's the most important thing to you? And the top thing that's most important to them is figuring out how to capitalize the balance sheet. And we have a certain thesis around New Energy Nexus, which is that building clean economy companies is not just about venture or die. And that the very, very best way to build your business and capitalize your balance sheet is through a delighted customer experience with growing revenue that is profitable to the organization. And that's the highest calling from a CEO perspective. If you're doing a direct sales relationship, indirect sales relationship, and then you kind of bump down, like, how else can I get cash on my balance sheet? And for our optics, the very best next thing is to get grants or to win prizes or to compete in competitions, be awarded certain non-dilutive blocks of capital. And this is where OpenGrants.io fits very, very well. And then you drop down to other options like joint development agreements, non-recurring engineering contracts, paid pilots, conditional purchase orders, etc. And then there's private equity, there's debt options, there's a whole bunch of other things. But this is a really important thing. It's of top interest to our community. And I think the work you're doing at OpenGrants.io is very, very important, but this is really not about solicitation. We are here to educate people with very succinct to-do lists after they complete these sessions. So to kick off, I am going to just go do a very, very quick background for people about if you're new to OpenOffice. Today's session is called Awareness, Engagement, Success with Non-Dilutive Grants, and we're going to get to that, but a little background on OpenOffice and New Energy Nexus. New Energy Nexus is a 15-year-old not-for-profit 501c3, so people are welcome to give tax-advantaged donations to our work. And really, we focus on diverse, global, clean economy entrepreneurs trying to solve a climate solution somewhere. Our work boils down into 4 big buckets. It's helping people launch businesses. It's helping people fund businesses. It's helping them accelerate their emotional intelligence and executive education. And it's also how do they scale? How do they match up with pollinators, whether they be government pollinators or commercial pollinators or capital pollinators? How do they scale that business and go beyond the startup and into the next realm? We have a vision of 100% for 100%, and that this decarbonization work should not simply just benefit the rich. This should benefit everyone, and this transition can and should be an equitable transition. OpenOffice is a program that fits very well into Accelerate around helping CEOs make improved decision-making, and it's free to people who want to sign up, and the information will be shared where you can email Jessica and sign up for a session. It's a one-on-one coaching and mentoring session. And we also have a digital archive where this will be posted after we're finished. And people really have given us great feedback about the content and how this content is really very unique and very actionable, which I find a great compliment, really. So our speaker today, as I said before, is Sedell Trebowski, but Sedell goes beyond OpenGrants. He has been involved with a marketing company. He's been involved with something called CarbonBLU, which was helping fleets transition to non-carbon and electrification. And he's also involved with some water work. And I would like to just ask Sedell, tell us a little bit about your journey, because obviously everyone's is not a straight line, and yours is very interesting. And also, how did you connect with Sean? So go ahead and give me a little journey story.
Yeah. So, you know, going all the way back to sort of the beginning of my trajectory as a entrepreneur, I guess, I was kicking around in college for a minute, and I found it just to be unengaging and not super interesting. So I left. I got a van and traveled around North America and South America, lived in a van for a while, and worked as a river guide, and got really into in touch with just sort of my feelings about the environment, the economy, things like that. And, you know, from there kind of kicked off a career that focused on building companies and helping other people kind of leverage the resources around them. So my first venture was Guerrilla Digital, which we took that name and we're really inspired actually by, I had been spending a lot of time in Argentina and was super inspired by just the way that people kind of engage with the world there and leverage all the resources around them to do things in a place where doing things is difficult. Like, you know, we take for granted sometimes the ability we have to go open a bank account and it's quick and easy. And I remember trying to do that in Argentina. It took me about 3 months to like figure it out. And not just because I was a foreigner, but because the system was inefficient. And so there's just a lot of opportunity in, you know, everywhere to kind of improve those kind of systems. And so that really became the focus of a lot of what we did at our consultancy, and our marketing and media company, which was Guerrilla Digital, was helping people kind of leverage the things around them to make things more efficient, to build efficiencies in their business. And from there, I worked at a company called ECO, where we worked on emissions, getting emissions approved for new kinds of vehicles and getting those approved and passed through the EPA and CARB. And in that trajectory, myself with some of our partners, we decided to launch a company called CarbonBLU, which was helping, as you mentioned before, helping fleets integrate alternative fuels and advanced vehicle technologies into their portfolio, so helping them reduce their carbon footprint. And as we were doing that, we bumped into Sean Garvey, who is definitely one of the sort of preeminent and authorities, forward-thinking kind of authorities on public funding. He runs a company called Momentum, and he is a good friend, mentor, and board member of our company, currently OpenGrants. So we bumped into him. He helped us raise money for our company at CarbonBLU, and helped us win a grant. And that was a big change, for us. It went from having no money to almost $500,000. And that's a big thing for an entrepreneur when you get that first chunk of seed capital and you can finally do stuff. And you've been sort of like hobbling along with this vision that you're really passionate about, and finally like, oh, I can run, I can go get things done. And it's a big switch. And so Sean helped us not only strategize about that, but navigate that ecosystem. And over time, while ultimately we ended up, I ended up leaving that company with my team. And we struck off to do our own adventures in entrepreneurship. We continued in contact with Sean. I ended up working with Momentum for quite a while, and just became really fascinated with not only amazing things that he and his team were doing with public funding, but just the ecosystem in general, where there's billions of dollars in this non-dilutive capital format that are being deployed. And if you're smart and have the tenacity and sort of wherewithal to navigate it, I mean, these are the kind of levers you can pull that will literally just launch you into, commercialization. They'll give you the means to go out and raise venture at really favorable, on really favorable terms, because you're building a company that is sustainable, that doesn't have a ton of debt, that has revenue, and you're doing it with capital that's not diluting your ownership. So, and that kind of brings us forward.
That's a very good point, actually. Let's pause for a moment and make sure that the entrepreneurs that are engaging in this content actually hear that voice, which is an equity investor that's looking to make an early stage venture investment. If they see that a CEO, and I can speak for myself as an investor, but also I hear it all the time from investors, that people want to see that their CEO is resourceful, and they want to see that she is going to be able to go out and access a variety of capital sources. And, when you just talked about before, if you have $500,000 of grants, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $5 million of grants, and it's enabled you to get into a position to establish product market fit or test rigorously product market fit, create some revenue. It's a totally different game for that kind of company. And so not only have you demonstrated your resourcefulness as a CEO, but you've also putting yourself or giving yourself enough cycles to iterate around the product market fit, period, because it's always longer than the CEO thinks it will take. And you're definitely going to move 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 times before you actually get the lock. And when you get the lock, everyone knows how exciting that is. But it takes iteration, takes time and money to do that. So you said it. I just wanted to tease it out again. Incredibly important to be accessing non-dilutive capital from every place possible that can possibly apply. It could be a city, county, state, federal, quasi-federal, foundations, competitions, all sorts of stuff. So we're going to get into that in a little bit, but I wanted to pause you right there for a second. Let's dive in to OpenGrants.
Yeah, we spent a long time and I know that people familiar with the space will understand, and this will resonate with you. And for people unfamiliar, don't let this scare you away. But we spent a long time just suffering under the inefficiency of bureaucracy within the government. And it's something that is, just starkly apparent now, where you see the government trying to deploy, even like the Paycheck Protection Program is the one, like it just like gets me every time that, oh, there's all these businesses that are getting money because they know how to apply and they know how to pull the strings within the system, and they don't actually need it. And meanwhile, Main Street America, small businesses are dying left and right, and you have massive, economic disruption. And it's a tragedy that we've brought on ourselves by building a bureaucracy that doesn't have the tools they need to understand the stakeholders that they're supposed to be serving. And there's some programs, I'm not saying it's all of it or all of government, there's some programs that do a pretty good job of addressing their stakeholder needs and understanding and doing outreach and connecting. But by and large, the government unfortunately just doesn't have the tools they need. And so when we developed OpenGrants, what we wanted to create was modern infrastructure for public funding. And the way in for that, and one of the reasons I'm excited to just be here to talk to founders about this is, the way in is to first just engage the ecosystem that needs this money. I'm always surprised that, I think in clean tech, it happens more often where people know that grants are available and that they're available in substantial amounts. It's not like just $10,000. You could go find $10 million potentially for your infrastructure project if you're working on something innovative. And it's a great resource that you have to leverage but to use it, just to use it, you have to be aware that it exists. And, it's funny when we go to I worked, one of our investors is Boost VC. And I spent, before the pandemic, I spent time in the basement there in San Mateo, and I would just walk around to all the companies that were there and talk to them about grant funding. And, maybe half of them knew that it existed. The other half were like, oh, that's amazing. Can we, how do we sign up? How do we get the grants? And so it was some instant kind of traction that was really cool, but, shocking every time that people just don't even know that it exists to start with.
Yeah, I want to go back just quickly to the PPP program. Part of the CARES Act that came out earlier this year. Initially, the first round was very, very difficult to navigate. And to your point about equity, if you didn't know, or if you weren't being highly coached by a very sophisticated financial person, many of our companies, small companies, did not get round one PPP. And that was very frustrating to us because we spent a lot of resources on creating an open office program around accessing, whether it was the PPP or the other portions of the act. And the success rate was very poor. And then the second round came out, and we came out with another, how do you navigate this challenging environment? And the success rate was very high on the second round. And we got better at educating our community. Our community got better at it, figured out what they did wrong in the first time. And it's really not the fault of the government agency, because they have so many stakeholders that they have to create a fairly complex and intricate kind of program designs and deployment designs and reporting and all these types of things. It's a lot of money. I mean, I think it was all in total so far, it's been $2 trillion in PPP. So we're talking an incredible amount of money deployed very, very swiftly. But I'm glad that while you were in Adam's basement there in San Mateo, Adam Draper of Boost VC is, he's quite famous mostly because of his father, but also on his own terms as well. And others around the shop were saying, this is the product market fit iteration. You just walked around the shop and said, how many people know that there are grants available? And some said, yeah, some said no, and off you go, right? Really nice story about product market fit testing right there.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and that's, it was great because it's nice, and we do miss it, although now we use Lunch Club and a few other tools. But, when you're just in a space like that, there's entrepreneurs everywhere who are all working on neat things, and they're, trying to change the world. You can go and, really quickly, get a feel for the room. And then, that's a population. But I think, San Francisco and the coast in general is a lot different than, we've started working with some accelerators and other groups in Arkansas and Ohio and different places around the country. And depending on the age of the ecosystem and how much really they're engaged with the public sector, there's a pretty big sliding scale of kind of awareness of what's available and how companies can leverage it from the public sector. And that's, at the heart of OpenGrants is really just this desire to make it transparent and equitable and accessible, because, I totally enjoyed and loved working with the Momentum team. And really appreciated all the insights they were able to give. But at the same time, that's not a company that everyone can afford. And when you can't afford them, go hire them. They're amazing. They're going to crush it for you. But before that, you need help. And,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of great tools in place that can give you that kind of caliber of assistance. And so that's, at the heart of OpenGrants is facilitating that kind of introduction to that kind of service and awareness of just like the possibilities, and then getting you that initial kick so that you can get capital to go hire someone like Momentum, or someone with like deeper capacity to think very strategically about your product as you scale from kind of pre-seed and early concept into Series A space and commercialization and that kind of stuff. So.
Well, we also have seen, and we're considering doing a breakfast club for CEOs that do open office. We've seen that peer-to-peer learning and that camaraderie amongst cohorting and things like that. That is an incredibly strong learning tool. And like you experienced with Boost VC, just being in the physical space now, we're all challenged with physical space nowadays. But being in a shared, safe, virtual space where CEOs can learn tools, learn tricks, learn how to cope or whatever it might be, it's incredibly valuable. So we're looking at doing a breakfast club for our CEOs just once a month, where there would be a topic of interest, and we'll have everybody come together. Maybe we'll have a guest speaker, that kind of thing. So I wanted to certainly pause on that for a second and just say that's really interesting, and also reiterate the fact that there's a load of public dollars available to clean economy startups out there at all different levels. And as Sedell has said just now, Momentum, previously called Grant Farm, run by Sean Garvey, he's subcontractor to New Energy Nexus. So, there's nothing wrong with us talking about this, but there are others out there. I mean, there are others very bespoke grant making and writing and accessing groups, but they're expensive. And so you've made a clever move here, which is, let's try to open this up to everyone. Let's try to have a entry point that is pretty low slope. And so we can just ramp tons of people into this machine, and we're going to really focus on scouring. Let's find every little pot, every little pocket, every little corner where potentially someone in the clean economy, whether it's related to water, around energy, at pumps water, or whether it's around ag, energy nexus, whether it's around just pure green generation or decarbonizing built environment, whatever, you guys are the go-to on this. And I really think that this is a clever thing that you're doing, and certainly equitable, very, very easy access, low bar. So you do, obviously, in your experience working with CEOs, you have you got to do this, you got to be thinking about this, you got to, sort of work through these challenges. Give our CEOs a flavor for, the top 3-4 things that you just must be thinking about as you enter this space.
Yeah. I mean, the first one is just to sort of get your company in order from a kind of a back office, or like, your financials and your HR. That's the first thing, because it really, and I struggle with this myself. I know that admittedly, this is one of my points that I don't enjoy it really, like all the organization and the admin stuff. And we work with some great contractors in this space, Pilot being one of them, that will take care of all that. But you want to get all that stuff in order, because you're going to be doing business with an entity that, very well could audit you. Also, there's just a lot of kind of controls eventually that you probably will need to put in place if you get a government contract or a grant. And so the first thing, you want to take care of is getting your financials, HR, all that stuff in working order.
But more succinctly, let's be real clear. You're talking about articles of incorporation. You're talking about good standing. You're talking about foreign qualification in a state that requires it. You're talking about registration with the tax bureau of that state. You're talking about employment contracts, non-disclosures, non-competes, advisor agreements, board agreements, all this stuff, right? That's when you say get your HR stuff together. You're talking specifically about that.
Yeah, exactly. So getting, Yeah, basically, everything from incorporation to down to the documents your employees have and making sure they have the right disclosures about time off, and all of that stuff, just getting it in order, getting it all squared away, everyone signed on, and having all of, job descriptions clearly defined, salaries clearly, agreed upon and signed off on. As a founder, several times over, I totally understand, when you're getting up and running, some of that stuff kind of slips by the wayside, and typically you have plenty of time to sort of correct it as you go. But at the moment that you're getting a contract like this, you're going to open yourself up to more scrutiny, and so you need to get it squared away, and that includes everything from employment agreements to articles of incorporation, and then some very, depending on the agency you're working with, you're going to need all that stuff to go get your registrations and other things in place. And I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but
no, we did an open office session with a guy named Jeff Berklin, who's an old friend of mine, Harvard Business School guy, really, really smart. He works with over 200 startups across the United States as a part-time CFO. And it's like yourself, they've been very clever in saying, if we make the cost too high, it's onerous for a small startup. But as people grow, they grow into us. And I've used Jeff's service at Berklin Associates twice now, in 2 different companies that I was running. And I found it invaluable, just to make sure that you have all your tax filing done correctly, you have your books in order. It's not an official audit. I've found that in the early stage, actual audits are not required, but having your books in an order that could be audited instantly is completely apparent to the counterparty the moment they look. And when they see that, they recognize, okay, a professional has been involved here. We're not just on an Excel sheet with, cost and revenue, like that kind of janky nonsense. It just shows so well as the CEO, and the costs are very, very low. So I really think that you're spot on when you decide to enter this arena of, do we want to go to OpenGrants? Do we want to start accessing non-dilutive capital? Get your HR stuff in order. Get your financials in order. It doesn't cost you that much, and it's totally worthwhile. It is not totally awesome, fun stuff to do, but it's required. What's next? Let's get that house in order. So finance and HR, get that stuff in order. Put it in a data room. Lock it down, have a username and password, and continue to grow that data room as you grow. So you're not doing this piecemeal. You could use Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever, but just keep it all centralized and keep on building it, keep on curating it. That's where you will eventually do your Series Seed or Series A diligence out of this thing too. So start the practice right at the get-go, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just double down on that before moving on, that, at some point you're going to have some VC's attorneys wanting to do diligence, and if you hand them a hot dumpster fire, they're going to be unimpressed, to say the least. So if you do it now, you build it into your culture, and it just stays with you as you grow, and it's invaluable.
And I also think that a lot of people put off that human capital playbook. There's a lot of words for it, but the corporate playbook, how are we going to do things? How are we running this organization? The HR manual, people sometimes call it. I think there's a lot of templates out there. I think YC has a really good one too. Just get any one of them and use it as a guideline. And you could say, oh, that one's not for us, or this one is for us, and let's adjust that one a little bit to fit our culture or whatever it is. But just the fact that you have an HR manual will show well to your counterparty, whether they're a government agency looking to grant you money, or, as you say, a foundation or family office or venture capital firm looking to say, yeah, we want to support your journey. This is about impression as much as the details in the documents, So what's next? So that's first. What's next?
The second point that I think is crucial is just getting super crystal clear on what your strategy is. It's a especially these contracts with the government, they're 2 to 3 year kind of plans. And one of the big sort of, we did a sort of market research project interviewing VCs about their thoughts on grant funding. And the reason we were doing it was to just assess, like, because our mission with OpenGrants is actually to take companies, get them the grant funding, and then, you know, hopefully give them a view to venture and means of growing and commercialization. And the big feedback we got back from a lot of VCs is they're like, we hate it. We see frequently companies that are otherwise building really cool tech get all sideways on some grant project and then just stay over there building some weird thing, and they get sidetracked.
Yeah.
And so that's a, you know, a big focus of ours, and a big focus I think is, you know, getting clear on strategy so that you can say no to the wrong kind of money and right to the money that is going to propel you forwards to commercialization and, you know, viability in a market, instead of just, you know, grasping at grant money because it's funding and you think you need it.
Well, there's also, I think, a critical step even before this, which is, what's the vision? What's the mission? What are the values of the organization? And many CEOs poo-poo this as, you know, oh, that's, you know, we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. It's the tech, or it's the, you know, rush to the market, or whatever it might be. But if you do not have the vision and the mission, I think it makes these are your rudder, you know? And so when you say, what do you say no to, which should be most of the time you're saying no, and then what are you saying yes to, they're fully aligned with the mission, right? They're fully aligned with that vision, and there's no compromise. And just grabbing money because it sort of fits, and then you're off in the weeds doing this project that's not really related, it's not progressing your vision or your mission. I see it a lot too. And I can't stress what you just said enough, but do it through your vision and your mission, right? And then your values are the context. Your values are how you hire. The values are the people that create the culture, right? So I really love what you just said about that. And I think it's important to say no, and don't just chase grants because it's right. And I'm hoping that in some way, OpenGrants can help CEOs navigate and say, is this one really for you? Like someone comes rushing in real hot. Oh, hey, you know, Sedale, we want to go after this thing because of this. And you're like, all right, hold on a second. What's your vision? What's your mission? What are your values? Let's talk about that. Where do you want to be in 24 months?
Yeah, and actually, I'll just mention real quick that at the urging of, you know, our biggest investor, that's actually a process that we've built into our onboarding when we meet.
Great.
So, you know, a startup will engage, you know, on the platform in general, then they'll get like matched to some specific grants, and then they'll have a meeting with a grant writer. And part of that onboarding is to discuss how that fits into their strategic goals moving forwards, because there are some times where we're like, no, this isn't a good fit for you. Go out and do PO financing, go out and do something else, because this is going to just take you down a weird path and it doesn't meet, you know, with your commercial kind of goals.
Well, and sometimes managing a grant is more work than the grant itself.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't get that. It's like, oh, okay, so it's $1 million grant, but I have to match it with another 50%. So I got to go find $500,000. And then I have to report every quarter, which takes another 20 grand of an outside consultant to do. So now I'm leaking out, you know, 80 grand of value. You know, it just becomes nonsensical in a moment. So it's really great that part of the screening process is vision, mission, values, what's aligned. Now let's talk to a human, and we'll get that real triangulation to happen, and then we push. Yeah, that's really clever. Very smart from a strategic point of view.
And I'll just mention that, you know, as a founder and currently the CEO here, it's like we built that deck right after we raised our first, you know, big round of capital, of like vision, mission, and strategy, and we come back to it all the time. And it's something I use frequently to tell our COO and our CTO, because they get really in the weeds about certain things. I'm like, look, this isn't, you know, this feature or this product that you're arguing about or yelling to me about is not something that is actually like necessary for us to succeed. And it doesn't, like, it takes us down a weird path. And so avoiding those kind of weird paths, getting clear on that strategy, that's kind of the second, you know, really just critical thing to prepare for as a CEO, and being, you know, being very clear on that. And I think this next one kind of has to do with that, and that is, you know, my third sort of point that I think every CEO should know is that they should just go hire a grant writer, unless you as the CEO are for some reason a great grant writer, which happens, and you've just done it a bunch and you're ready and like, you know, the program you're going after. Go hire a professional. You hire an accountant, you hire an attorney. Like, don't don't try to write a grant.
Yeah, I completely concur with this advice. It is low cost relative to the outcome, and it also is a massive distraction to pretend that you're a professional grant writer. You may be a good writer, but writing grants is not like being a good writer. Writing grants are figuring out exactly the way to phrase things, exactly the things to mention, what research needs to be done to pull this or that out. You're so right. Hiring a grant writer, I mean, for example, how much in your experience is a grant writer? $1,200, $1,500, $2,000, something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it does vary quite a bit, but, you know, it could be anywhere from on the very high end, on a long project that spans, you know, months, you know, 20, 30 grand. But at the low end, you know, these, you know, we have some great writers who are, you know, $50 an hour, and, you know, it's 100 hours to get something done, and they're off to the races. It's
yeah, and if you're talking about, even so, the management team might even be able to get 50% of the way there, right?
Exactly.
Like, they do the first cut, and then the grant writer comes in and they take it and they shape it, and maybe their 100 hours turns into 30 hours or something like this. So there's a give and take there, but you're not talking exorbitant money, and the outcomes are really, you know, in your experience, you found an engagement with a grant writer really radically changes the outcomes, correct?
Yeah. So statistically, it triples your chances of success. And that's from, you know, that's from data from a variety of different.
Hold on. We need to stop and recognize that, because this is venture returns, folks. This is venture-like returns. You put $1 in and you get $3 back.
Yep.
Did everyone hear what he just said? Hire a grant writer. They're professionals. There are lots of them, and I'm sure that that OpenGrants could point out a couple of really good ones.
Yeah, that's what we do. But I think I want to touch kind of back on something you just kind of said and go really deep on it for a minute, and that is that you're not hiring a writer. You're hiring someone who understands the thinking of a bureaucrat who is going to be reading something you're writing. You're hiring someone who can really tell a story with words that you might not even know. You're hiring someone who's a talented storyteller and who understands all of the levers to pull in order to like activate money for you. And that's at the heart of like grant writing, is this art. And so it's really critical that you think about that. You're not just getting a writer. It's not a writer that you're getting a consultant, someone who excels at strategy and critical thinking. And that's like at the core of what they're providing. The writing is, you know, you can do it, your team can do it. And that's, I think, to your point, if your team has time or you know, are at least competent writers, you guys can pull some of you can do a lot of the heavy lifting and get the writer to come in and really just refine and dial things in for you. And so there's just a kind of a universe of possibilities here, but at the core of, in the crux of what, you know, what I'm saying is, and you're agreeing with, is hire a grant writer, get a professional who knows what they're doing. Like,
yeah, because there's a couple of different sources here too. There's grants with government counterparties, of course, and then there's grants with foundations. That there's a very different strategy. There's a very different writing style. There's a very different, you know, well, let's say strategy again. And then there's also competitions, right? And writing an application for a competition might involve someone like this type of consultative strategist as well. They may be very good at that as well. Like, we do a lot of competitions. We're doing the EV and battery challenge with LG Chem and Kia and Hyundai this year. We're also doing a big decarbonization real estate competition in New York with NYSERDA. both of those have corporates at the back end there. And so certain parties will help you write a really good application to those programs. And I really think that's very good advice that you're giving here. Very good advice.
Yeah, it really does change just drastically. Like I said, 3 times as likely to succeed. Yeah, and then, finally in this sort of trajectory of, hey, get things in order, get really clear on your strategy, get a professional to come in and help you. And that professional will, one of the things they'll do very early on is let you know that you need to start engaging your partners and bringing in other people to make you successful. And I think this is one of the things that, Sean and his team at Momentum really excel at. And I don't know that I've ever seen anyone do it better in terms of just, they put together these really expansive, beautiful strategies where they open up, like, instead of saying, hey, we're going to put electric forklifts and we're going to deploy them into this ecosystem, they're like, hey, we're going to electrify the whole thing. We're just going to electrify this port, this city. We're just going to do the whole thing. And we're going to bring in all these different, sources of capital, all these different people. And on a small scale, as a startup, you should be thinking about your ability to bring in partners to help you be more successful and competitive. And it's not, you don't need to go really deep unless that's something you do need to do. But typically it can be as simple as saying, hey, instead of going and applying for this grant to do this project over here and not, at this, place that we control. Maybe we're doing this research project in our lab. Maybe reach out to someone who you could actually demonstrate your technology with and go say, hey, if I get you a grant, will you use the grant money to buy my thing? And there you go. That's more compelling.
I just did this yesterday with a CEO. We were talking about a very specific grant call that's out. And we were talking about the consortium of partners that come together, and which is such an important part. And we divided it into, okay, they're the technology provider. And then we had a commercialization partner. We had a research partner from a university network. And then the third was a testing and validating laboratory. So there was a really nice circle of how is this actually going to get to market? Because in this case, the granting agency is very, very thoughtful around job creation and has recognized that the clean economy is like the single biggest sector, potential biggest sector, if supported correctly, to create jobs, and good middle-class jobs, not just, garbage service jobs, but really good, strong, permanent jobs. And so this was about, how does this technology get from the laboratory into a safety situation, into the AHJs, in concert with the university's endorsement, and then ultimately with the commercialization partner? How do we get into the channel? How do we get into the households and the businesses out in the community? And, that was the story of the consortium. But what you're saying here around get your stakeholders engaged early, and then ultimately you're going to have to solicit letters of support or letters of co-investment or all sorts of other stuff. And I'll tell you from experience, that is a long haul with a big commercial partner potential. Yeah. Because they'll say, well, wait a minute, we're basically signing up to a purchase order. And you're like, not really, but it's conditional. Yes. So if we, win this grant, some of that money, and you turn it around, give it to me, and we do all this, like, okay, takes time.
Yep. You got to chase it up the chain and then back down and sideways to whatever other departments have to
What's
sign
the
it.
average time in your experience? What's the average time? And from the moment you decide on who that circle of consortium partner is to close, what's a really healthy lead time on getting that done?
Oh, I mean, we try to put a 2-month kind of buffer around it because it really does take a long time. And depending on who you're working with, maybe a 3-month buffer is better. But if you have good, warm relationships, you could usually get it done in a couple months. But yeah, I mean, if it's cold and you're coming in like out of nowhere with no groundwork laid, 3 months is maybe not enough time. So
Yeah, 90 days. That's a lot of time, lead time that CEOs have to be thinking about that stuff. But if it becomes a practice of the organization, you're going to also get muscle memory from this stuff too. So you'll have your trusted parties on the grant operation. You'll have the trusted partnerships. You'll have but it's got to become institutionalized in your organization, that even if you just raised $10 million in Series A capital, non-dilutive capital helps you leverage every dollar. Because every dollar you sold of shares is very expensive. So you want to invest side by side with non-dilutive capital to really expand your impact.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we talk with VCs about this all the time, just in terms of, we even approach them and say, hey, we want to deploy capital alongside what you're doing. Introduce us to portfolio companies, because guess what? Their burn is going to be twice what they think it is, and they have half the runway they think they do. And we're going to just expand their runway for them. And it doesn't hurt your position in the company, and it actually enhances your position, And so I totally, it does. I think it's something to always think about. And the interesting thing about this, and kind of along the lines of engage your partners early, is just to engage this strategy early as well, in terms of, hey, make sure that while you're thinking about your next raise, go out and look around and see what kind of grants are available to move one of your strategic initiatives forwards. Offset your R&D costs, offset some of your infrastructure costs by leveraging some grant funding. There's $750 billion in grants got poured into just the federal ecosystem in 2019. And I mean, that's a wealth of opportunities.
That certainly is. Sedell Trebowsky is the CEO of OpenGrants.io. And just to review, his advice here is start early, make it an institutional practice to be going after grants, organize your financials, organize your HR documents, keep them in a data room in an ongoing manner, get really clear on your vision, your mission, your values, say no when it doesn't match up. Hire professional grant writers and grant consultants. They're very, very helpful. 3-to-1 ratio there, and engage your partners early, because it's very rare that as a single applicant with no other parties around that you're going to win. You need to have a consortium. That's really the experience that he's talked us through here. I want to thank you. This is fantastic, and people can use OpenGrants.io, and I think they should. And then ultimately graduate maybe to something what Sean's doing at Momentum.io or other parties that do this type of grant work. But this has been a great session, and thank you so much for being part of Open Office.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for the awesome work y'all do, and excited to, if anyone is interested in connecting, I'm sure my information will be around, but definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter, however, and pop over to Open Grants if you're looking for grant funding.
Right on.